Thanks for coming, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce Lisa. This is Owen Charles. I'm a member of the Shoreline Greens. I will moderate this next part of the agenda, and it's my honor to introduce our speaker, Lisa Savage. Lisa is our inspiring green neighbor from the state of Maine, as you may know, and she's running for Senate against the Republican incumbent Susan Collins. Ooh. Maine, as you probably know, is the first state to have ranked choice voting. Yes. Lisa is a longtime anti-war and environmental organizer, as well as being a public school teacher and a grandmother. She is just now retiring from 25 years teaching in rural Maine to run, and she was a VP of the Teachers Union and a chief negotiator. She has been involved in racial justice issues in Maine, and in addition to organizing against the wars, their economic cost, and militarism's harm to climate, we should note that she has been arrested several times protesting warship celebrations at General Dynamics Bath Iron Works, which is unfortunately our nasty militarist cousin to the north of Electric Boat. So welcome, Lisa. Thank you very much. And I would just note, if you have questions, we only have time probably at the end for 2 or 3, so put them in the chat, please. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Connecticut Greens, for inviting me to give the keynote. It's an honor. Some Connecticut Greens are, I feel, friends of mine because they came up to Maine to help with ballot access back in the very cold part of the winter. And I met some of you there in Portland, Maine, after we'd been out in the field all day. So I very much appreciate this chance to address your group. One of our big volunteers actually is on the call right now today too. I think Brian Gay is with you. I saw his name anyway. Brian's been helping us out a lot on social media. So I feel like I'm among friends, and I will give you my thoughts, and then feel free to, ask me anything. So I am feeling like the current pandemic condition is really an opportunity for real people's real needs. Many of us here on this call already had a pretty clear idea of how difficult the economic circumstances were of many, many people that live near us, and how almost no one had adequate health care, and had the grave inequities in education, depending on what your zip code is, and a host of other problems. However, it does seem that the pandemic has shown a very bright spotlight on the yawning chasm between the super wealthy and the rest of us, and especially on the critical need for single payer universal health care. Call it Medicare for all, call it something else. But many, many people in the US, I think, did not realize how bad the situation was. Their eyes have now been opened. They understand more clearly what kind of a crisis we were already in. And I am very, very hopeful that even though it's painful and chaotic, that this crisis offers us an opportunity to make some really fundamental changes that we've been overdue for a very long time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the platform, give you an update on the campaign, and then see what thoughts and comments that you have. I am a Mainer, native Mainer. I was born in Maine in 1956. And my father's family is from Maine, many generations, and they had an ice company on land that was stolen from the Wabanaki, the original inhabitants of this area. I try to always be mindful that I'm on stolen land, and that the wisdom of the indigenous people who knew how to live here sustainably should have been heeded by European culture when it came in and commodified everything. And my inherited wealth, not that it's a huge amount, but I inherited land and built a house on it because someone in my ancestry stole land from the Wabanaki people. I grew up outside of Maine because my mother was from California. So I lived in California through high school, and then came back to Maine to attend Bowdoin College, and left again for a few years, lived in Japan for 4 years when I was a young mom. I have 3 children, they're all grown, and then returned to Maine in 1988 to run a family business. I inherited from my dad. And after about 7 years of that, realized that wasn't for me. And so I went back to school at University of Southern Maine, got a master's degree in education, and entered the career change in teaching. And I'm now at the end of 25 years of that. So I was working on a federal school improvement grant that I had helped write that created the position that I'm in now, which is reading interventionist at a very small, rural, very low income school. And I had said I would work to the end of that grant and then retire. But when this opportunity to run for Senate came along, I revised that to say, if I get ballot access, which I did, I will retire a year earlier than planned and devote myself to the campaign. In my family, on my father's side, it's not uncommon to be in public service. My father was running for the Maine House when he died, and his father served in both the Maine House and the Maine Senate for many years. And my grandfather, he was high school classmates with Margaret Chase, later Margaret Chase Smith, the famous senator from Maine, who gave the Declaration of Conscience speech standing up to Joe McCarthy as a freshman senator when everybody else was scared of him, and sort of made her name that way. My grandfather and Margaret Chase Smith remained friends for life, and I've met Senator Smith. So on my side of the family, on my dad's side, it's not an unusual thing to run for office. My dad also was a city councilor and filled other roles like that. I was not planning, however, to run for the Senate. I had been a vice president chief negotiator, as Owen mentioned, representing the teachers union in a district that I worked in before this one. So I have had some experience with elected office, and in particular with representing constituents' interests, because being chief negotiator is very much like being a candidate. You're the spokesperson and a leader of the team in a sense, but this is a team sport. There are lots and lots of people sitting with you at the table, and there are even way more people behind you all saying, this is what's important to us, these are our priorities, this is what we're willing to bargain away to get this one. And I took that job pretty seriously. And I thought I should never say anything at the table that my team does not know is going to come out of my mouth. And I think I was pretty good at following that. But one of my jobs straight out of college was that I worked for the American Arbitration Association. And I was trained in mediation and negotiation and community dispute resolution early in my work life. So those skills have come in pretty handy here. Also, being a teacher for 25 years, I think has really trained me to deal with the public, to be comfortable having people disagree with me or even be mad at me, to always listen carefully to people that you want to communicate with. Communication is about finding out what the audience is ready to hear, not just saying what message do I want to broadcast. And I think that that will be helpful to me as the campaign goes on. The platform that we have developed, and I'm not going to say anything here that my team doesn't know is going to come out of my mouth. So, you know, one of my jobs is to stay on message. The platform that we developed has not changed since I had to unenroll from being a registered member of the Green Party, because they literally make the rules so that a third-party candidate cannot
audio.
We weren't going to get to 2,000. So I had to unenroll as a Green. I'm now running as an independent, and we were able to gather the necessary signatures in one day on Super Tuesday. We stood outside the polls and gathered them all, more than 9,000 signatures. We only needed 4,000 as an independent. So the platform remains the same. I remain Green at heart, and I can't wait to re-enroll as a Green. I think, you know, by the time I'm sworn in, I could be a Green again, but I do need to remain unenrolled to run. Is that Medicare for All used to be the second thing that I would mention, and during these this crazy public health crisis, it's moved up to number one. Everyone who's resident in the U.S. desperately needs quality, guaranteed health care without any barrier in terms of affordability. It's not an individual issue, it's a public health issue, and we can see the effect of people being afraid to go for a test or afraid to go for treatment because they're afraid they can't pay for it. And also the shocking effect of having no meaningful leadership at the national level for a health crisis of these dimensions. The Lancet published an editorial this week calling on the American people to fix that come November, citing the grave threat to global health, that we don't appear to be able to empower the CDC to, exert that leadership. I think other countries have been pretty surprised to see how quickly we sort of fell apart under this kind of a threat. Maybe those of us that live here weren't as surprised, but it is still, it's an ongoing crisis that badly needs to be addressed. A demilitarized Green New Deal is also a very important part of what I'm running for. I say demilitarized because we all know that some of the promises of clean energy systems have not panned out to be quite what we thought they were on the surface. My conception of a Green New Deal has always been based on the campaign that I worked on for years before becoming a candidate, and that is conversion of General Dynamics Bath Iron Works plant here in Maine, which only builds warships for the Navy. It didn't always do that. It used to build other things, but it's become completely dependent on Pentagon contracting, and that right there is a terrible climate problem, because the Pentagon is the largest institutional consumer of fossil fuels on the planet. If it were a nation, it emits more. If it were listed with other nations, it emits more greenhouse gases than 140 of them. And to stop building weapon systems would be an immediate win for the climate. Of course, if you shut down the plant, thousands of people would be thrown out of work. Bath Iron Works is the biggest employer in Maine, and that is not anything that I would work for. I would like to see a just transition, and I also know from economic research that if that facility started building other things, they would generate far more jobs. Our four congressional, representatives from Maine always tell us we can't stop those contracts at Bath Iron Works because jobs, but they're being disingenuous. They know the research out of UMass Amherst showing repeatedly, if you put $1 billion into different sectors of the economy, building weapons is like the worst jobs program. It's capital intensive. There's a lot of robotics involved. Putting that $1 billion into clean energy systems or building a light rail transportation system that Maine lacks would generate around 50% more good union jobs with benefits, real jobs that a family could live on. So I see that as another win for climate, and a win for a just transition, so that working people don't have to pay the price of our bad budget priorities any longer. I also feel that consumer-owned utilities, including internet, including electric utilities, are a very important part of any Green New Deal if we're going to, obviously cutting down on consumption is also really key, but any Green New Deal that doesn't address the fact that why are we generating energy and then transmitting it thousands of miles as it loses, you lose a lot of power by transmitting it so far, just so rich people can become wealthier. That is a bad plan. We need more local control. The consumers will make wise choices about their own energy needs, I believe. And if we could take the profit motive out of it, I think we'd all be a lot better off. Addressing the student debt crisis is also high on my list. I am, I think that public education has been underfunded my entire lifetime, and that would be in Maine or in California where I grew up. But also here in Maine, the student debt load is higher than average. It's very high compared with most other states. And even students who come out of our community college system or our state university system, which is extensive, still are carrying thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars of debt as they graduate into, a weak job market. There's a great migration out of young people from Maine because of that very fact. But I don't really see why public higher education shouldn't be free of debt. The other wealthy countries can afford to educate their young people and train doctors and train teachers without burdening them with debt that you can never get out from under by declaring bankruptcy, and that you may spend decades paying back. I think that the Pentagon budget is the first place I would look for funding some of these programs and taxing the wealthy. As a school teacher, I've paid around 30% tax rate on my income, while billionaires pay nothing. That too is, the arguments of how you're going to pay for it. I think that those are false arguments and framing the question falsely. I also feel very strongly about immigration reform, about treating people that are seeking asylum with humanity. This separating children, even babies, from their families and putting immigrants or asylum seekers in indefinite detention without due process. What is really any different than the way concentration camps were run at that point? Or we can, in many ways, condemning them to this incarceration during a pandemic is akin to condemning them to be very much at risk of dying as well. So I do feel strongly, Maine has been an asylum state for a long time. We have a lot of immigrant communities that came in waves from different conflict zones, including Central America, including Africa. And I think that strengthened Maine has really helped us be more, a more vibrant culture, a younger culture. Lots of the people have started their own businesses. A lot of them are small farmers. And another strength of Maine is that our farming average age is low, and our percentage of farms owned by women is high, and that is very much due to new Mainers, I think, entering in farming as an activity. So I have, of course, many more issues. You can visit the website and check out the issues page if you'd like to know more about something that we didn't talk about. During the pandemic, we have started a series of petitions for the campaign as a way of giving people an action that they can do that will help their fears and feeling of impotence during such a crisis. And the very first one that we launched was a petition to close Bath Iron Works. Bath Iron Works has 6,000 employees that are from all 16 counties of Maine. Many people ride vans to get to their job there. And very early on, there were cases detected there, yet we've deemed building weapon systems as an essential service during the pandemic. So the workers were given the choice: go home without pay, use up your sick time, use up your earned vacation time, or stay and work, but we will not pay you to stay home. General Dynamics is one of the top 5 weapons manufacturers globally, and they pay their CEO $20 million a year and plus a $6 million bonus. They could well afford to pay their workers to keep safe and stay home. The unions got involved and pressured the General Dynamics to close the shipyard. There were several members of the Maine legislature that went out on a limb and wrote a letter to the governor saying, you do have the power to close Bath Iron Works in a public health crisis, but the governor did not, and the town of Bath did not. This corporation gets huge tax breaks from both the state and the town that it's in to operate, yet when it comes time to take care of their workers, they're not there. So we got a lot of mileage out of that petition. We sent the petition on to officials at the state. And since that time, we've had a petition about asking for rent relief. The Maine early on said that rent could be postponed. But if people are out of work for a long period, that's just postponing a crisis to 6 months down the road. We do have an eviction freeze, but really not only renters, but like homeowners, mortgage holders that it's on their home, really need meaningful relief from the banks that have made so much money from us all these years. There's no reason, again, that people have to experience the fear of being evicted. We know that 1/3 of people in the U.S. were unable to pay their rent on April 1st. I haven't seen the new figures for May 1st come out yet, but I've got to guess it was more than 1/3. And again, this is an untenable situation. You can't tell people just stay home to keep, to flatten the curve if they don't have a home to stay in. So that was a very popular petition still. People are still signing it on our website. And then more recently, we launched a petition calling for a people's bailout. We've now seen 3, and we're about to see the 4th, stimulus bill, pandemic relief coming out of Congress. I know that people are much more ambivalent about the one that came out in the House this week because it does have many good provisions. However, the fact that it was going to bail out lobbyists makes me not feel very favorable toward it. In any case, the Senate and the executive branch have said that that's never going to fly. But we have on our website developed a platform of things that we feel would be very important to actually bail out the people and actually make sure that people can stay home safely if they're able. If they are frontline workers who must go to work or really can't stop with their own economic activities, to provide them with health care, child care, and guarantee that they're not going to lose their home or not be able to feed themselves. So that also has been very well received, and we're continuing to, we have a large group of volunteers that help on social media, and we look for news items or happenings that connect with some of the initiatives that we have going for the campaign. And then we, social media volunteers can paste in a link to that petition and direct people to, hey, here's an action you can take. Here's a campaign that you might want to support. And so that is, we have a very small team at this point, and you wouldn't probably be surprised to hear that fundraising kind of tanked when the pandemic set in. For about a month, we really weren't raising any funds other than the recurring donations that some people had signed up for. I worried about that for about 24, 48 hours at the very beginning, and then I realized the whole economy is coming crashing down around our ears. Your campaign treasury is the least of your worries at this point, Lisa. And so we just, tightened our belt, wrote it out for about a month, and then fundraising has really picked up again strongly. I think that many of our supporters are working class people with very little spare change, and we have many donations, recurring donations that are under $10. People all over the country contribute to this campaign because Susan Collins is not a popular senator at all and becomes more unpopular with each passing day. So really, since she supported Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, many, many, many progressives and women in America would give to anyone that they thought would help unseat Susan Collins. Because we have ranked choice voting, my presence in the race is not a spoiler, but rather is increases the chances of unseating an unpopular conservative incumbent. Because we have had ranked choice voting for a couple of years now, but in 2018, it did help unseat Bruce Poliquin, who was the representative from the 2nd District, where I live, the poor rural part of Maine. And because there were 2 independents that ran strongly in that election, when their names were removed from the ballot as running last and second to last, the second choice votes of the people that had picked them first almost all went to the Democratic challenger, Jared Golden, and that's who took the seat. So there's definitely a precedence here. It wouldn't surprise you to know, probably, that the Maine GOP just got essential status for the signature gatherers that are working to get a referendum on the ballot to defeat ranked choice voting in November, even if they're successful in getting it on the ballot, which looks unlikely, even if it prevailed on the ballot in November, which is very unlikely. We've passed ranked choice voting twice by referendum strongly in Maine, it won't affect this election. Ranked choice voting will be in play for this election. In fact, it will even be in play for the primary. The primary has been pushed off to July 14th. It was to have been in early June. I will not be in the primary because now I'm running independent, but that will also be a ranked choice voting election. So it's interesting to see what will happen there. Right now, our big initiative on the campaign is kind of a fun one. Before the campaign, I was thinking, okay, leverage your strengths. What do you have? And I realized I have so many friends that are artists. Maine is a very art-oriented state. And my husband and I have many old friends that are, pretty established artists. Robert Shetterly of the Americans Who Tell the Truth series is one. And so I had the idea to do an art auction as a fundraiser. I put it on the shelf when the pandemic came along, and then I went to a virtual art show of one of my friends that her gallery in Portland had organized recently because people can't go see her show. And I realized, oh my gosh, you can do that on Zoom. It actually works kind of well to look at art on Zoom. So we revived the idea, and we have many donations of some pretty spectacular art. Some of it's political, some of it is not. We have a website called Lisa for Maine, that's spelled out FORMAINE.ART as the one-off website for the auction. And people are starting to look at the works. And the silent bidding opens May 18th, but we have a live auction event scheduled for May 21st at 5:30 p.m. It's on Zoom. And we're encouraging, even if people don't intend to bid, come along for the show. We have an auctioneer who's a friend who's very funny and good at being an MC and auctioneer. So I think it will be entertaining, and you'll get a chance to see some great art and meet some maybe artists that you don't know. So that's on the horizon for us. And we're also in the process of interviewing campaign manager candidates. We've been operating without one. We probably needed one about when the pandemic hit at least, but we've been sharing that job. I'm really a manager type, but I need to focus on being the candidate more and do less of the management so that I can do lots of interviews, and we're getting a lot more attention from alternative media, national alternative media, and I think that's going to lead to even more. So I'm feeling optimistic this week about our progress on the campaign. Things are going well. Again, I would say that in these times of trouble and in this time of crisis, with the climate crisis, with the COVID-19 crisis, I believe that we have an opportunity, if we keep a clear head and keep our eyes on the prize of, let's not go back to normal. Normal was not working for most of the people we know. Let's create a new normal, a better normal, and use our resources more wisely going forward. So thanks for listening to me. I look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. So we have time for a few questions. I think we've got just about 10 minutes. And again, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm trying to catch all the ones we have. We do have about 5 of them. Some of them might be fairly quick. Ben Conroy asked, at one point, somebody's phone was ringing. I had to mute everybody, so you were muted briefly. We missed what you were saying about why you had to run as an independent. If you could. Yes,
the system is stacked here in Maine to make third-party candidates fail to get ballot access. Many a Green candidate has worked very hard and failed. The rules were we couldn't start until January 1st. We had to be done by March 15th, and we had to collect 2,000 signatures, same amount as the Republicans and Democrats, and they only could be Maine registered voters. There are 43,000 registered Greens in Maine. However, it was a year when Bernie was running in the primary at the time, and many people switched, especially young people, wanted to be registered Dems so they could vote in that primary. And it's also ice season from January 1st to March 15th. So when we decided to pivot, the Bangor Daily News reporter called the Secretary of State in Maine and said, hey, Lisa Savage is unenrolling so she can get ballot access. Her campaign is claiming that it's stacked against third-party candidates. Do you agree with that? And he got the Secretary of State to basically say, yep, especially in a year when Super Tuesday primary, which Maine doesn't usually have a Super Tuesday primary, he said it's not intentional, it's just the way it is. Well, he's a Democrat, so that's what he would say. But it was gratifying to us to hear the Secretary of State go, yeah, the game's stacked against you, so,
Yeah. So this is a question from Rana Stuller. What has been the voters' response to ranked choice voting being initiated in Maine?
Mostly confusion, I think. Paradigm shift is hard. We are sold on the concept of false dichotomy from the moment we emerge from the womb and they assign us a gender. Oh, there can only be two. There's only two choices. You're one or the other. So I think most voters in Maine are only vaguely aware that we have ranked choice voting. They aren't really sure how it works. And of course, especially the Maine GOP tells a lot of falsehoods about it, like, oh, it's diluting your vote, or, oh, you have to vote for people you don't want to vote for, or, other things that are silly. It's a big education process to bring people along on the ranked choice voting, learning how to use it and so forth. But every time we have a referendum, it passes overwhelmingly. So there are enough people that understand how it works and want it. The city of Portland just passed ranked choice voting for its municipal elections on Super Tuesday, and that's where the bulk of the voters is down in Portland and Cumberland County, southern Maine. So I'm encouraged. I think people will get the hang of it.
Okay. Jeff Russell had wanted to make a quick statement as someone who's run for Senate here in Connecticut. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hello, Lisa. Jeff
Hey,
Russell here. I was Green Party candidate for United States Senate in 2010, 2012, 2014, and 2016. And from what I see of the referendum, I think there's a lot more people who understand ranked choice voting in Maine than don't. And I would have loved to have run as a ranked choice in a ranked choice election. I think there was a chance I could have outpolled the Republican in a couple of those races. But one thing I learned from those 4 races is having the bad habit of speaking as intelligently and honestly on issues as I could, which will never get you elected in the United States, historically speaking. I found that every race I ran, I had people coming up to me and say, I wasn't going to vote at all, but after listening to you, I'm voting. I would encourage you to motivate as many as the people who would otherwise sit on the sidelines to get out there, because I think that's going to make a big difference in the fall. And best of luck to you. I'm happy to see you running. And if I were closer or healthier, I'd be up there helping.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, and then I think we have time for a couple more questions. So Justin Paglino had asked, will you have the opportunity to debate your Republican and Democratic opponents on the stage? And he also asked, is there any kind of handbook for running for Senate? How do you, it's new to him. He's wondering how you're managing that.
It's an interesting question. So far, both the incumbent Susan Collins and the presumed Democratic nominee Sarah Gideon, a very corporate Democrat who's Speaker of the House in Maine, have ducked all appearances with the other candidates. So the University of Southern Maine has the Muskie School of Public Service that many town officers and public servants in Maine go to. It's a grad school in Portland. They organized a candidate forum. It was to have been face-to-face. They switched to a Zoom event, and neither the Republican nor the presumed Democrat would show up. And then the climate strike, youth climate strike organizations and youth climate justice organizations that are largely high school and college students also set up a candidate forum to talk more specifically about climate and environment, and both the presumed Democratic nominee and the incumbent ducked that one also. Just yesterday, I taped an interview with WERU, which is our big progressive community radio station. And again, the 2 no-shows were as expected. So it's interesting to wonder what will happen with debates. The tradition is to include anyone who's on the ballot in Maine debates. And of course, who to include isn't up to those 2 candidates. It's up to whatever entity is hosting the debates, whether it's a college or a TV station. So I anticipate being able to be on the debate stage with them, but who really knows where we'll be and what we'll be doing. I certainly hope so. And I'm sure they will try to block me from being there. I'm just not sure they'll be able to. And the second part of your question was, is there a handbook for running for the U.S. Senate? No, I wish there was. If you find one, will you send it to me?
Yeah, I think that it ends up being a lot of help and support from advisors or people who've had experience, right? Joining.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sure people in the party will be reaching out to me to give me some advice,
Yes.
which I appreciate.
I've gotten lots of good advice and support from elders of the Green Party, but I'm not sure they had a lot of experience with Senate races.
Well, I'm technically
Specific to your question.
Congress, but still.
Yep. Mhm.
So the next question was from Brian Gay. I think we still have 5 minutes. Wow, we're doing good. And Brian had said, with a lot of focus on the presidential election, what's the best way those of us outside of Maine can support your Senate campaign?
Well, Brian, you're the one who's doing it. So you could probably answer this question. You know, Brian has ties to Maine and is in New England and understands the importance of this race. So he's been very supportive as a volunteer, a distance volunteer. I have a key volunteer who's in the UK getting a master's degree in political psychology. I have a volunteer who's in Mexico as a US citizen living on Social Security who goes to Mexico several months a year to make ends meet and kind of got stuck down there by the pandemic. And we have volunteers all over the country helping out. Obviously, if you're able to make donations, that's very helpful. We will have to pay a campaign manager in order to, get the right one. But sharing our posts, I'm able to do usually now lately an interview every 2 or 3 days with usually a national outlet. So sharing those around, if you listen to it and you think it has merit, that's great. And going on our website, there's an action tab. When you go, the website is Lisa4, spelled out F-O-R, Maine with the E on the end, MAINE.org. There's a little tab up in the upper right-hand corner. It's kind of buff colored that says action. If you click that tab, it pulls up a form that says, will you volunteer? And if you fill out that form, it creates a platform for you. Whenever you return and click the action button, you'll see a whole menu of actions that you could take, things you could share, ways to engage. And when you do so, if you are signed in to the website, you get credit for that. So there's a leaderboard that shows, who recruited the most new volunteers, or who posted something about Lisa that got the most Facebook likes or Twitter retweets, or, there are different platforms involved. And a tradition that's evolved is that whoever is the leader for the week on that board, we have a Wednesday status call every Wednesday afternoon. Whoever I hear is the leader that week, I, as the candidate, not as the campaign, send them a pizza from their favorite pizza shop. And so Brian has been the recipient of that pizza. And if, it could be you next week, you never know. So there are lots of ways to support us, either with funds or with your time, and telling people word of mouth, that is more powerful than many people realize. I have people in Maine say, well, I can't give you any more money, but I'm telling everyone about you. And I say, that's probably worth more than a donation, because that's, Maine doesn't have very many people. We have like 1.3 million people and maybe 500,000 voters. That's not a lot of voters. And I've lived here continuously since 1988, owning a small business in a town that was sort of a crossroads county seat town, and am working in 2 different school districts with district level jobs in those districts. So my name recognition is already pretty decent, but of course our opponents are just flooding the airwaves with a glut of advertising at all times. Both Sarah Gideon and Susan Collins have raised tens of millions of dollars outside of Maine mostly. And, but again, Mainers don't necessarily respond to that kind of barrage of, broadcast messaging. So I think that we have a definite chance to win this election, and we are in it to win it. This is not just an effort to move the conversation left. If I'm going to work this hard, I intend to win, or do my best trying. So a lot of the people on the team feel exactly that way. And I really appreciate the question, Brian. You've been a great new volunteer. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think there's time for just one more question. This was from Mary Lawrence. What is your position on the Farm System Reform Act that was recently proposed by Senator Cory Booker, if you have a position on that.
I'm not super familiar with that act. I do know that most of the farm subsidies in our country go to big agricultural farming corporations, and small family farms are going out of business constantly, going bankrupt. So I don't have a super lot of faith in Cory Booker as a progressive. He seems like a neoliberal Democrat from what I've seen of him, but I would really have to study that bill to give you a good answer about his bill.
Okay, we have a minute. Mary, did you? I unmute you. Sorry, you are unmuted.
Oh.
You should be unmuted.
I think you kind of covered it. Essentially, the bill, the two components of it is to move away from factory farming and phase out CAFOs. And the second part is to resume country of origin so that people know where their food is, particularly animal products, are coming from.
Well, those both sound like good ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, and Cory Booker is a vegan. There is that in his.
I did not know that about Cory Booker.
Yeah. Otherwise, not the greatest candidate, Cory Booker. But thank you so much, Lisa. I'm glad we have in the chat, we have how to donate, a link to donate, and a link for the art auction. So that's cool. And I think if we just go to lisaformaine.org is where you can volunteer as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Great group. Thanks for caring, and good luck with your election season as well. You know how to reach me.